Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode 235 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I'm Anthony Ewing, CEO, co-founder here at Thoughtium, and happy Thursday. We go live to all of our social networks every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central. You can find this episode and all previous episodes at thoughttium.com/live. And we love to hit the live button every week. Again, 235 episodes in. We've learned so much about how we grow and change within organizations. We've talked to leaders from across a handful of different organizations on how to build and scale the learning experience. And today, we have an incredible guest that I am personally looking forward to really jamming with, particularly around this topic of building and scaling learning and development within organizations. And this episode today is for you leaders that are at the helm or maybe the starting point of building an emerging or startup organization, and as well, you learning and talent development leaders who are navigating larger organizations and trying to find the best practices to bring into your organization as a way to stay on the cutting edge. Today's episode is titled Building L&D That Grows Within Your Company. What are the two or three key things that we've got to keep in mind as we try to build and scale the learning experience across our organization, across new populations of employees, across the ever evolving tastes and requirements of our learners. And in order for us to unpack this topic, we have Josh Zimmerman. He is the Senior Director of Talent Development at Kong. And I am super thrilled, Josh, to have you at the table. Welcome to Navigating Now.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anthony. I'm super excited to be here.
Of course. So, Josh, you and I were talking a little bit earlier today. We just met, and these are my favorite episodes because this is an opportunity for our community to, get to know you and your leadership perspective, and it's also an opportunity for you and I to kind of weigh in on a couple of hot takes when it comes to supporting and developing our people. So, in the true spirit of Navigating Now, this is a completely unscripted episode with a singular focus on how you build L&D that grows within your company. So by way of introduction, Josh, my first question to you is, give me a memory or a moment in your past that you can call back to where you can say, man, that was maybe one of the first times that I acknowledged that this is what I want to do in my career.
Great question. So, well, thanks again for having me. I would say it's when I first started in strategy consulting in the Bay Area, helping companies scale talent development and field enablement for high-tech companies. And it was the very first project I was ever on at Accenture. And my first project was helping HP build their sales learning academy. And I was like, man, this is a job that you can do: curriculum design, content development, working with stakeholders. And it was by chance that I got put on that project, and I kind of just fell in love with the field ever since. And that was about 12 years ago or so now. So
that sounds like a really meaningful first project. At an organization like Accenture, I could imagine there's a certain level of almost hazing that happens that you've got to really like pay your dues to be put on the cool projects. I know that was the case for me in consulting. So kudos to you for being put on such an exciting project. My first project as a true management consultant, this was back in the day. I was working for a large life sciences consulting organization. And I will never forget the day I had just left my job and I was like, I'm taking this consulting job, and I was so excited about it. I probably bought 3 or 4 new suits. I was in my favorite brand new suit, and I flew down to Atlanta to the client site, and I'm thinking I'm immediately going to be thrust into like a boardroom with a bunch of senior leaders, and I'm going to get to really, share my perspective on learning and development and where the industry is going. And the principal or the head at the time texted me. He said, I want you to meet me at this hotel in conference room 3B. And I was like, oh, wow, it's a conference room. Like, this is even a bigger audience that I get to be in front of, right? And I go down and I open the door to conference room 3B, and I kid you not, it's an empty room, no windows, floor to ceiling stacked with boxes of iPads. and
Oof.
the client was going through a digital transformation and introducing iPads to their sales teams. And my job, they had an entire consultant solely focused on charging the iPads before they were
Mm.
deployed to the sales team. And
Yeah, I
I
think
was immediately just kind of slapped in the face with the reality of consulting.
yeah, I think I got a little lucky having had some work experience before Accenture. But if you start right out of undergrad,
Yeah,
there's a lot of tasks like that what you just described.
you got
So
to pay your dues. Yeah, yeah,
you
you
got to
got to
pay
pay
your
your dues.
dues. You really do. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. So
It's a grind for sure.
yeah, so tell us a little bit about your work at Kong, and if you could, for those folks who maybe doesn't don't know the business of Kong and the tech space that you play in, try to translate a little bit about what Kong does.
Yeah, well, let me start there. So Kong is essentially we are powering the API world, and an API is essentially your interconnectedness between different systems and
Yeah.
tools and platforms through technology. We are essentially, a platform that customers can build, secure, manage, govern their APIs all in one place. And with the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, AI needs APIs to exist, right? When you type into ChatGPT a prompt, it's sending out APIs out into the world and retrieving that information back to you. So essentially, Kong provides you a governance and architecture to manage those APIs all in one
Mm,
place so that they're secure. You can monetize them, you can monitor them, and build them all in one place. So that is Kong in a nutshell.
yeah,
And
I can imagine that space is only getting bigger as organizations are going to want a more seamlessly integrated like suite of tech, and as companies are also trying to reach their customers through different platforms, like APIs sit at the center of that, right?
yeah, APIs are the center, and
Cool.
AI is only accelerating that.
That's it.
So
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
yeah,
And your work as a talent development leader there.
yeah. So my work as a talent development leader, I joined about 3 years ago. Was the first and only talent development leader the company had ever hired.
Wow.
And my role is really broad and varied in scope. I feel like I've worn so many hats since I've been here. It's leadership development, onboarding, talent development, skills taxonomy, the whole life cycle of developing people within an organization. I also just recently took over the talent management process as well, so
Mm,
that's been keeping me busy. So it's
yeah.
the full life cycle of the employee experience here at Kong.
When you joined Kong 3 years ago, how were they kind of managing onboarding and talent development without a single leader? Was it kind of they would wrangle internal experts, or did they have somebody that was at the center of onboarding and upskilling and development?
Yeah, so the company, pre-COVID was very, office centric. They had an employee experience team that was very focused on
Yeah.
workplace experience, and they were the ones responsible for managing the onboarding program with the HR business partners.
Mm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I asked that question because I'm always fascinated with how uh, organizations evolve into a more formal or a centralized learning and development or talent development function. We work with a lot of startup organizations that are trying to make that decision as early as possible. Do we need to bring in a talent development leader? Do we need to build a learning and development program? Because in most cases, organizations will go far too long with
Mm.
training that is an onboarding checklist, and set up some time with the CEO and a couple of other thought leaders, and for good reasons, right? Organizations are still making the case for learning and development early on in their growth cycle. um, Talent development, learning and development is oftentimes seen as more of a support or enablement function. So early on in the organizational life cycle, they're maybe not as prone to investing in a non-revenue generating function. I think those organizations, and it sounds like Kong is one of them, that are investing in the learning experience and are doing so in a way that allows the organization to build, and or the learning experience to build and scale with the organization. those are the orgs that seem to be a little bit more ahead of the game. So congrats on this role.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And it's funny you bring that up because when I first joined Kong, I was like there were 500 employees or so. I was like,
Yeah.
is this too early for a
Mm,
talent development function? And I think I was pleasantly surprised that it definitely wasn't the case. I think scaling with the company, we're about 750 employees now. So being part of that journey with
yeah.
the growth of the headcount, it makes sense to establish that function now.
Yeah, and again, big kudos to Kong for making that investment, that early on. It's a conversation that we're constantly having with small and mid-sized organizations in terms of kind of when to pull the trigger, and we make that argument because there are several key ingredients to building and scaling learning and development that do require focus and effort and dedicated headcount, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So
Yeah.
the episode is really on building L&D that grows with your company. What are the two or three kind of things that we've got to keep in mind if we are focused on supporting and enabling a growing organization. So, Josh, maybe I'll just open it up to you. From your experience and your more recent experience at Kong, let's start with maybe what's one critical mindset or thing to think about when it comes to building and scaling the learning experience within an organization.
Mm. I would say trust and relationships is critical,
Mm,
right? Especially when you join a company that is a little bit smaller in size and employees, like Kong was when I joined, 500 people. Everybody knows each other. The executives are very much in the weeds. They're with you. Building that trust and those relationships early on through quick wins and trust and that you're going to get things done that actually push the needle um, has been a really massive takeaway for
mm.
me since being here. I think it takes time to develop those relationships, but the more you can lean in and focus on those quick wins early on, the higher the likelihood that the programs that you want to deliver will be successful.
Yeah, I love that. I jotted down, my kind of top three for the day, although I feel like they're changing by the week. That's what we do here is offer this type of perspective. And you touched on one that's near and dear to me, and you talked about leveraging relationships. I would argue that any organization that is really trying to build L&D that grows with their org, um, it's not a nice to have, it's a need to have leaning on these relationships. And a perfect example of where this plays out early in building learning and development, or if you're in a growth spurt, is that you will oftentimes not have a training team large enough to have the impression that you're going to need across, potentially in your case, hundreds of folks. So you've got to rely on internal experts to become an extension of the L&D department and the learning experience, and more specifically, inline managers. So my maybe number one best practice for building and scaling learning and development is to see your frontline managers as an extension of the L&D program that you're delivering. They should be having learning discussions with their people, which are different than coaching discussions and they're different than weekly
Mm,
one-on-ones. And those learning discussions should be really tied to the program that folks are going through, whether that's initial onboarding or continuous training and upskilling. It's a powerful unlock, and it only comes by way of great relationships. To your point, Josh.
yeah, no, the relationships are critical. Like if you don't
Yeah.
if you don't have that and if you don't build those and you don't really reinforce and emphasize it, it's going to be really hard to gain traction.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so we start with relationships, which I love. I think that's success in any aspect of business starts with relationships. Um, what's something what's another thing that's on your mind, Josh, or that has been critical to the success of building and scaling L&D at Kong?
Yeah, so I would say, a big area is prioritization, right? I think sometimes small L&D teams tend to do like a peanut butter spread of different initiatives and different
Mm,
different programs, and it's almost like it's too much. And I ran into this mistake in my first in-house role after leaving consulting, where I just tried to do everything that every employee wanted, and where
yeah.
whoever was the loudest, I would focus my attention there. But at Kong, I think the team and I, we're really focused on what are the top 3 to 4 initiatives that we can really go deep in to really push the needle? So, prioritize and execute. What are the focus areas? Is it onboarding? Is it leadership development? Where can we make the most impact with the business without having to overstretch ourselves? Because right now we're a very small team
Yeah.
supporting a ton of global employees. So
There are probably a lot of learning practitioners out there listening that are nodding their head yes, right? At Thought Team, we work with a handful of different functions within the commercial org. None more, let's call it, under prioritized at times than talent development and learning development. And that's not because they don't have that skill set. It's because they're being asked to do a lot. And as well, L&D, talent development, tends to be in much more of a service orientation to the organization. So we love to take it on. We love to take it on.
yeah,
When marketing comes and says, "Hey, we need training on this," like, our hair will be on fire to make it happen. And that does pose this challenge of prioritization. And again, this wasn't scripted, but your point around prioritization being, a critical component to scaling learning is very much in line with maybe my number two, which is one of the ways that we can stay focused is by building systems, not programs. So oftentimes when
mhm,
you are stepping into an L&D role, you kind of see things by way of programs. You have your foundational training, you have your upskilling, you have your continuous development. Maybe you've got new product training or technical training that is being assigned by the organization. We like to say before you build a specific program and just deliver that to the organization, think of what system you can build that allows these
mhm,
programs to be built in perpetuity. And so, for example, if you're building a foundational training program, an initial onboarding program, it's not a matter of just kind of getting in a conference room and saying, okay, what's day 1 through day 30 look like? Take a step back and say, what are the critical pillars of learning that no matter how we evolve as an organization, we're always going to fall back on? What are some of the ways that we can spin up new content so that when this program becomes out of date, we're able to refresh it on a continuous basis? Who are the 3 or 4 internal subject matter experts that we will always have on the line to be able to call on to either update or create new content? All of those
yeah.
kind of discussions are part of a system that you're building as opposed to just, and I think this gets to what you're saying, Josh, almost being an order taker and just kind of like getting an order and building the thing. Build some
Right.
systems, and you'd be surprised at how those systems then can help you stay focused and prioritized.
Yeah, and I think like we're doing that with onboarding right now, completely
Great.
automating the process, making it self-service as possible, and making it fluid within the employee's journey within that first
Yeah,
30 days. It's an automated system that will be refreshed as we go and as we progress. So that's a great point on building the
love it.
systems. Yeah.
I can't get away from the power of three, so we're gonna go one more, Josh, if you have it in you.
Sure.
Again, this episode is all about building learning that grows with your company. We're talking to Josh Zimmerman. He's the senior director of talent development at Kong, and we're kind of unpacking our top 3 best practices for building and scaling L&D. What do you have for number 3, Josh?
Yeah, so I would say, it kind of goes back to those relationships, and your executive leadership team, the
Mm,
CEO and the C-suite are your biggest allies when it comes to implementing new programs and getting people to participate.
mm,
Kong, we are in hypergrowth mode, right? We're a Series E
yeah,
company. We are scaling like crazy. So to take people away from generating revenue or building the product, it requires that C-suite buy-in. So if the CEO and the executives believe in what you're doing and they know that it's going to have tangible business results, they are more likely to buy in what you're doing and get their people to actually participate in those programs and those initiatives that you're driving. And I would say also too, I think sometimes in L&D we focus on the short term,
mm,
but we are in the business of behavior change, and that
yeah,
requires a long-term perspective. So, the engagement score at Kong, it's kind of fluctuated since I've been here, but now it's just kind of up on the way up, and that's because it takes times for these programs to be felt in the business. You might not see
yeah.
that immediate impact on day one.
I love what you're saying. You're definitely speaking our language here at Thoughtium. The importance, almost the requirement of buy-in and engagement with your program and your strategy, and even what is the unique learning experience within our organization. Engagement from all the way at the top of the organization is so critical. Oftentimes in traditional commercial organizations, learning and development sits within enablement or even under commercial operations, and we're potentially several layers removed from senior leadership. That does not mean at all that we should exist in a silo. That does not mean at all that we don't have a story to tell. And it doesn't reprieve us from the responsibility of making sure that we're communicating how learning and development is, to your point, shaping behavior and driving outcomes. And so if you are a learning leader in an organization of 60 or 6,000 or 60,000, and you do not have a 2 to 3 year learning strategy, you've really got to take a look at prioritizing some time for that. Your ability to get in a room and tell not just the story of the evolution of L&D and the learning experience, but where this department is headed and how it's going to meet the evolving needs of the organization by way of behavior change, skill development, learning outcomes. It's so critical, and you might not need it now. And it sounds like, it's so great to hear that Kong is in this kind of like hyper growth mode. And so L&D probably has a real seat at the table. It sounds like your organization's really prioritizing talent development, but there are learning leaders and talent development leaders out there that might not have a seat at the table. And one of the ways that we can quickly kind of get pushed out of the decision-making realm is an indicator is that we're not necessarily communicating or even measuring the value of learning and development. So I love that implorement, right? To be able to tell that story and to be able to ensure that our senior leaders are bought in and telling the story as well too.
Yeah, it's super critical, and honestly, it's I would really lean in heavily there, especially if you're at a smaller company with
Yes.
less than 2,000 employees.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So
Josh, thank you so much for the insights today. Gosh, this was one of those
yeah,
episodes that went so quick. We only we only shared 3, and I feel like it could be 30. But I'm sure you also have in the back of your mind, I've got a meeting at the bottom of the hour, so I can't write the book
hey,
here on talent development. But the insights that you've shared have just been so valuable and snackable. And that's what I so appreciate about today's episode. We really encourage folks to think about these key ingredients and audit a little bit of where you're spending your time. You can see how all of the insights that we shared today almost sit at that strategic level. And I know as learning leaders and HR leaders and talent developers, we have to play at every altitude, strategic, operational, tactical. But so much of what we do that provides so much value to our organizations is really at that strategic level, building a strategy, developing relationships, getting the C-suite involved. These are the things that require space and time, require you to think and act strategically. And Josh, I want to thank you for your practitionership and also for your reminders for us to stay in that strategic space.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I could talk about this topic for hours. So if you wanna keep going, I'm more than happy. But thank you again.
I love it. Well, if folks want to reach out and connect with you, I'm assuming LinkedIn's the best way to do it.
Yeah, it's Josh Zimmerman at Kong. LinkedIn. That's where you can find me.
Great. Awesome. All right. If you have a minute, we're going to do a quick lightning round. We like to kind of close episodes this way, and this allows our audiences to get to know you maybe a little bit more as a human. So are you game for a quick lightning round?
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
down.
Josh, what are you reading, watching, listening to today that you're totally geeking out about? And it doesn't have to be about L&D. It could be something in your personal life or something in your personal development.
Yeah, great question. So it's been taking me a while to get through it, but I've been reading the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. And this is all
Mm,
about human nature, and it's about, behaviors that, different humans display. And I think there's a lot of parallels with the L&D world, just in terms of reading and working with different types of people and their backgrounds. But that's been a really fun read. That's what I'm reading in the
very cool.
background.
What's it called
Yeah.
again?
48 Laws of Power by
Okay.
by Robert Greene.
Okay, that sounds like a fascinating book.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, check it out on
I
Amazon.
will.
It's got a ton
Yeah,
of reviews, so it's a good
yeah,
one.
that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Um, if you, Josh, if you had an opportunity to start a business tomorrow, and it, it could be drawing on your own personal skill sets, or maybe something that like you've always wanted to delve into, tap into that entrepreneurial spirit. Like, what would you spin up tomorrow? Where do you think there's a huge opportunity out there in the marketplace?
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, I would, I would really lean in for myself personally, just to writing. I love to write.
Mm.
I love to, write stories. Shameless plug here. I did write a fiction thriller that you can find on Amazon
Ooh,
called Deadly Sands. So, if anybody out there is looking for a fun thriller novel, check it
yeah.
out. Um, but yeah, I would definitely spend much more time writing now with two kids and working full time at Kong. It's a little tough to do.
Well, we have a few folks on our team that I feel like would be really interested in, in that. We
Yeah.
have a director of people and ops that she sits right across from me, and every once in a while I look over and she's got her earphones in, and she's doing deep focus work. And I ask her like, "What do you listen to when you do this deep focus work?" She listens to Dateline episodes, like
Wow,
when
that's
she's doing
crazy.
focus work. So I think there's something to like the fictional novels, and a little bit of just that like kind of divergent subject matter that can spark some creativity. How did you get into writing?
Yeah, I've just always, been really drawn to writing. It's very like cathartic, and
Yeah,
I just wanted to tell a story and had it in my head for a long time. So finally put pen to paper and got started.
that's
So
interesting. If you maybe
yeah.
last question, if you had to give advice to somebody who's interested in writing but like has no clue how to start, like what's something simple that they could do to exercise some of this creativity?
Yeah, I would say, the hardest thing about being a writer is just sitting down and writing. So, clearing your mind,
Yeah.
finding a good time that works best for you. For me, it's super early in the morning. So no meetings, no schedule, no kids,
Mm.
and carving out time to actually sit down and then just open the draft and get started.
Yeah.
I think honestly, I think that's the most difficult part with starting to become a writer, just opening the first draft and finding time to do it. But once you do it and you get into the flow and you do a little bit every day, it builds momentum just like everything else. And try
Yeah.
not to use GPT to write your story either, because that people can tell.
Oh, yeah, more so by the day, more so by the day.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I think it's one of those laws of creativity. If you want to get started in any creative endeavor, it's truly, we call it literally putting pen to paper. Your
yeah,
ability to just start and to create and show some unfinished work is the first principle in design thinking, and I think it's one of the most golden rules to creativity. So we
yeah.
appreciate that. We appreciate that insight. That's awesome. Who knew a
Well,
writer? That's incredible.
I'll send you the book after the call, and maybe
Yeah,
you
I'd
can
love it. I'd
check it
love it.
out.
I'm sure again
Yeah,
there'd be a
yeah,
few people that would read it here. Well, Josh, thank you
great.
so much for joining this episode of Navigating Now. Welcome to the community. Thank you for your leadership out there, and best of luck in your role at Kong, and all the great things that you'll do over the course of the next few years.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it, and thank you for everything that you guys do, and thanks for the opportunity.
Of course, we'll see you soon.
All right, take care.
All right. We want to thank Josh Zimmerman, Senior Director of Talent Development at Kong, for joining today's episode. That was a wonderful episode. So many of these, leaders are so willing to come to the table and put their name on insights, best practices, even hot takes on how to grow and scale the learning experience at your organization. That's just one of a few passions that we have here at Thoughttium, and one of the many messages that we like to send on the Navigating Now platform. So thank you for a wonderful episode 235. As I mentioned before, you can find this episode, all previous episodes, and even future episodes at thoughttium.com/live. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday afternoon and a great rest of the week. See you next week.